So it's no secret that in the bass fishing world, one of everybody's favorite topwaters and one of the most valued bites in bass fishing is a topwater bite, and everybody's favorite is a frog. Probably no joke there, no surprise, and a frog has probably caught more big fish if you look at the ratio of fish it's caught and big fish that are included in that than any other bait out there. Everybody knows that it absolutely catches giant fish and it is absolutely phenomenal at it. It gets back where big fish live, it gets back in the thick stuff, and you get some phenomenal blow-ups on it. It's one of everybody's favorite baits to throw, and I know it's personally one of my favorite baits to throw. But what's the problem with a frog? Problem, right? Nobody thinks problem when there's a frog. The problem with a frog is it takes forever to cover water. When you're trying to cover water and you're trying to figure out a pattern and you're throwing a frog, a lot of times what ends up happening is you burn a lot of time in non-productive water. So how do we get rid of that? I'm glad you asked. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break down some of my favorite frogs for covering water that's going to help you catch more fish and get on those big fish faster to save you more time out there on the water. So right off the bat, there's two frogs that I want to talk about when you're talking about covering water and moving frogs. And the first one that I want to talk about is a teckle style or a paddle tail frog. Right now I have a teckle frog right here, and then I have a booyah. Can't even remember the name, but you guys will yell at me for it later, but throw it down in the comments so I can remember what it is. But you have these two frogs right here, and they have a paddle tail on there, and what that does is that paddle tail just acts like kind of a whopper plopper tail. It just makes a thumping noise. As it's going through the water, it's causing bubbles, it's causing a commotion, and it really draws those fish's attention. And what these are really good for is covering water. Now the other one that I want to talk about is a soft body frog. This is a Z-Man toads right here. And I love a Z-Man toads for this reason right here. Some blow-ups that you get on topwater frogs can be absolutely violent, and those fish will absolutely demolish your bait. And if you're on them, a lot of times you get a lot of bites. And some of the stuff you fish around can be super, super destructive. So that Z-Man toads is super awesome for that elastic property. It also floats, which will help keep it up on the surface. But what do these two frogs have in common? The two things that they have in common is they both cause a commotion on the surface when being reeled. So you'll make a cast out there, and as you're bringing these frogs back, the Z-Man toads or some other brand, the tails will be back there just kicking, and with this booyah or that teckle frog, that tail will be back there spinning, so that's causing a commotion. And I really, really, really like these frogs when I'm just getting to a body of water, or I'm really trying to figure out where those fish are kind of setting up, if I'm fishing big pad fields, if I'm fishing thick grass, if I'm fishing over topped out grass. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. You get into those areas that grass is like just to the surface and it looks like those fish could be anywhere out there. Or you get into some of those expansive arrowhead fields, spatter dock, those lily pad fields that seem to go on for miles, and sometimes there might only be a 100-yard sweet spot in there. So that's what I'm talking about with these. Now, once I figure out where the fish are going to be at, I might put both of these down. I might not pick them up again. But what this is going to do is this is going to give me a key. And I might not even catch a fish on this. I might just have a fish blow up, boil, expose themselves with it. And that's the critical part of that. Real quick, guys, those of you guys that are new to the channel, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button to follow on with the content. But let's get back into moving frogs. So all I'm doing with these frogs is I'm looking for the dummy in the group. It might only be one fish, but that's going to help me delineate a giant area, an expansive area. All I'm going to do is I'm going to move through these areas. Whenever I get one to blow up on this, I'm going to hit a waypoint. And you have to remember to hit that waypoint where the fish blew up at. So a lot of times what I see people do is they'll bomb a cast out there, right? Get bit at the very end of the cast, and they'll put a waypoint on their graph right where they're at. That might be a 60, 70 yard difference. You know, if you made a long cast out there, which you can do with a lot of these frogs, sometimes that's a really, really big difference. And so if you're hitting that waypoint where you are instead of where the fish was at, it can kind of throw off your game when you go back through there. But that's all I'm doing with these frogs is covering water. And also, guys, I'm going to have all this gear linked down below just like I always do. I'm going to talk about the gear that I use to throw these on at the end of the video, so stick around so you guys don't miss any of that. But right now what I want to do is talk about what to do when you figure out where those fish are at. So once I have gotten a bite or two and I have figured out that, okay, these fish are in this area, that's when I'm going to break out everybody's favorite frogs, the pointed frog and a popping frog. Now, both do a very similar thing, but I use them in vastly different situations. As you can tell, one has a pointed nose and one has a cup nose, and they like I said, they do similar things, but they make a lot different noise. So a walking style frog, or that pointed nose style frog, what that does is that is a very sleek, very sly. It goes through a lot of heavy vegetation, and that is what I like to use when it is calm, when it is sunny out, when I'm really not trying to make a giant disturbance. This is my target frog. The popping frog is going to do for me is this is going to be my draw fish away from cover frog. This is going to be my, okay, I know the fish are in this area. I want to get them to come out from where they're at to eat this frog. So I like to use this around lily pads where I think those fish will be suspended up underneath of it and they're kind of out and around there and I'm really still not sure where they're at yet. I'm going to throw this frog. I also like that popping frog when it's windier out, when it's overcast. Typical, you know, moving style baits weather. You know, that little bit of wind, overcast, rain. Anytime that I have something that's going to cause more commotion on the surface that I have to try to get through. But on those calm, sunny days, I like a walking style frog. I also like a walking style frog when I know exactly what target I'm going to hit. I'm trying not to spook those fish. But those are the two frogs that I really like once I have gotten into an area and I have understood, okay, this is where the fish are at. Now I want to break it down even further, because a lot of times when you're throwing those moving frogs, those fish aren't reacting to it as much. They see it coming by, they hear it coming further away, and so they don't react to it. Versus these frogs, a lot of times they only hear it when it's right over their head, and they'll come right up and absolutely demolish it. So now let's dive into the gear that I'm going to throw these frogs on. It can be kind of make or break, and everybody talks about missing a frog, which I'm going to talk about in my next video, how to stop missing frogfish. But for now, I want to talk about the gear that I throw frogs on. Now, most of the time, everybody wants to throw braid, and that is 100% true. I wasn't going anywhere with that. I throw braid with frogs. You can throw heavy floor like monofilament if you really wanted to, but you got to worry about the stretch. I like P-line TCB braid. That braid seems to hold up the best for me, and it's got great castability and the least amount of memory in my personal opinion. Now, I'm going to use two different types. I use 50 and I use 65-pound braid. The 50 I'm going to use when I'm using these moving frogs, where I'm trying to make longer casts, or if I'm just trying to make longer casts with a walking style frog. Anytime I'm in a more open situation, I like the 50 because I can cast further. Once I get into that thicker, you know, really matted stuff, that's when I'm going to go to that 65, and I might even go up to 80-pound braid if I'm in some really thick stuff. So that's something that I also have to keep in mind, is how thick of cover I'm fishing and how thick a line you're going to have to use to get those fish out of there. That is key piece of information. If you're down in Florida and you have a chance at a 10-pounder, that 80-pound braid might be up your alley. Now, the rod and the reel that I'm going to throw these on. The rod and the reel are really critical components to this. If I am covering water, I will throw an 8:2-to-1 gear ratio reel to help me cover water. If I am making target casts with the walking frog or the popping frog in heavy cover, I'm going to throw a 7:2-to-1 gear ratio reel, because what that's going to allow me to do is that's going to allow me to get more cranking power on those fish to get them out of the cover in which they are positioned in. Now, the rod that I'm going to throw, if I am throwing a moving style frog, one of these walking, or not walking, but these buzz toads, or, you know, that Z-Man toads, where I'm trying to cover that water, I'm going to throw a 7.6, and it's going to be a heavy fast action. It's an arc essence. I like that essence because there's a full cork handle and it balances it a little bit better, but that's 7.6 because I can make a longer cast with it. Now, once I get to where I'm throwing the walking or the popping style frog, that's when I'm going to lower my rod a little bit to a 7.4, and they make a mag heavy, and it is also a fast action. And that mag heavy just has a heavy action tip, but with a magnum backbone, so I can really lay the wood to those fish and get them the heck out of wherever they're at. And the reel also applies the same for those. I like that little bit shorter rod for target practice when I'm actually like getting into the situation where I want to be making those precise casts. So frog pairs with one of my other absolute favorite baits, and that is a swim jig. At the end of this video, you'll have to check out this video where I talk about how you'll never fish a swim jig the same after you watch that video. It is one of my favorite videos on how to fish a swim jig, and I catch some good fish. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and God bless.